Hi, I'm the Moonlit Page Turner, and these are my first quarter reads of 2026. These are all of the books that I have read in January, February, and March. I have 25, so I have a lot this time. For some reason, Libby decided to give me all of my requests all at once and all in the month of March. So last year I added a category for banned books. I'm taking that category away this year because I'm not planning and specifically choosing banned books. I'll still read them, but I'm going to put them in their respected categories of fiction and nonfiction. I do have my book club reads, and I'll go over those first, but I'm adding the category of poetry and plays. So my goal this year is to try to get some of the books that I already own read, and to read a little bit more poetry, and I would love to read more plays. So I'm adding that as a specific category, so that way I can plan to read more of those. First category is book club books. I am in 2 book clubs, both actually here on YouTube. One is Savvy Gaming Network's video game book club. I have 3 books for you this time. And then my Read the World series. Both of my Read the World series are currently up on YouTube, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about those. So you can go check those out. But we're going to start with Savvy Gaming Network. We read The Sea of Thieves, Heart of Fire, and this is by Chris Alcock. I have not played Sea of Thieves, so it was an interesting introduction. I actually like this book. For someone who's never played it, you can kind of see what's going on. It definitely helps if you have played the game, but the characters in this book are not actually characters from the game, the main characters. There are some of the side characters that you see, including Flameheart. This is supposed to be his origin story. It does not quite feel like an origin story. You get his background, but that is like 1 chapter. So it does help if you've played the game. You don't have to. It was enjoyable. So I'm glad we picked it up. I don't know if I'll play the game based on this, but maybe. The second book I did not like. It is Myst. Actually don't have the book here with me, so I'm going to pop it right there. This is the second book. It's the Book of Tiana. I liked the first Myst book. I did not like this book. This book is, it's by Rand, by Rand Miller and Dave Wingrove. Although when you read the introduction, there are like 3 other people that are listed in the author or that have been involved with the books, and you can kind of tell that this book was written by someone different than the first story. So the first story, you get the fall of the Dunny, and that's what this book is supposed to be about. It says the Book of Tiana. This is not Tiana's book. This is Atris, the grandfather Atris from the first book. So I was not into it. I didn't like the characters. It was contradictory to what we learned in the first book, so I was a little disappointed. We do have 1 more book to go, but I think we're going to push that till next year just because we both really didn't like this book. Going on with games from the 90s, we read The Seventh Guest, and this is a novel. It's by Matthew J. Costello and Craig Shaw Gardner. This, as a book, was alright. This, as a nostalgia of the game that I played in the 90s, I liked it. That's pretty much why I gave this book 3 stars, is because it was reminiscent of my time playing this game on the computer. If you are not familiar with The Seventh Guest, the video game, you are a player who goes into Stoff. Actually, the thing on the back says, Old Man Stoff built a house and filled it with his toys. 7 guests all came one night. Their screams, the only noise. So you go in to try to figure out what happened, and you solve puzzles in the house, and then you see these scenes that are portrayed by real actors, and you try to figure out kind of what happened to these people. And so this is the book about what happened to these people. You get Stoff, it's his house, how he made his money, and the people that he invited and why he invited them. And you do actually see a lot of the puzzles in the book, which is why I was a little nostalgic, because I was like, oh, I remember the soup can puzzle, or I remember the piano, or I remember that freaking basement, worst part of the game. And so that part was fun, but as a book, not great. For my Read the World series, I am behind, and that is because of this book right here, The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood. It is chonky. This book took me about a month and a half to finish, so that is why I am behind. I read 3 books for Canada. One was an audiobook that I talked about last year. This book I did not like until about halfway through the book, where you meet one character, then everything starts to click. It's the story of a woman and her family. She lives in Canada in the mid 1900s, and you see like her full life, and you see her life in 3 different stories, and those stories all intertwine and come together. It's because it's called The Blind Assassin because of one of the stories is the novel that's called The Blind Assassin. That was my least favorite part of this book, but it's Margaret Atwood. She's a great author. She's a great storyteller. I just really did not have a good introduction to this book, but like midway through, if you're struggling with this book and you can make it to midway through, keep going. If at midway through, when you meet that one, he's a male character, and you're not like, oh, and you still want to keep reading, then DNF it, because this book is definitely not for everyone. The book, my favorite book from Canada, which I almost didn't read because the other books take me so long, is The 3-Day Road, and this is by Joseph Boyden. This is about 2 young Cree men. They're from Cree Nation, and they go into World War I, and one of them comes home, the other one does not, and you get the story of what happened to him and his friend as they take a 3-day journey on a boat. Him and his aunt, you hear his aunt's story as well. Beautifully written, incredibly sad story, but I really enjoyed this. And for Cabo Verde, I have 2 books. Again, these are both online when I talk about them. The Last Will and Testament of Senor de Silva Araujo. I was not a fan of this book. It's the story of, obviously, Senor de la Silva Araujo. His will ends up being kind of an autobiography, and so you learn about his life. I didn't like him as a character. He was a little quirky, and then you find out he's not a reliable narrator, and so reading as a whole, I was not a fan of this one, which is good that I loved this one. This is the Madwoman of Serrano, and this is by Dina Celestillo. This is about a town, but really it is about a girl that comes from that town, and technically she's born there, but she's an outsider, and you see her life and her relationships. It was told chunky and not in chronicle order, which I usually detest, but I actually really liked this book. It was kind of interesting, and I didn't mind that it was told out of order. So I'm glad I read this one second, because I think if I read the other one second, then I would not have finished it. Before I jump into fiction and nonfiction, I'm going to talk about poems and plays. So I only have 2 selections. This is Poyums by Len Penny. Len Penny is on social media. She is the Scottish word of the day lady. She is fantastic. Her poems have Scots in them, and that could be a little intimidating, but if you read them aloud, you can get what she's trying to say. It almost is just like you have kind of a Scottish accent going on. These are what I call FU poems, because she's been through a lot in her life. She writes about her life. Her poems are great. I've thoroughly enjoyed them. I would say they're not for younger readers, but yeah, I really liked it. If you're not following her, she's fantastic. She's got a 2nd book out, so I'm hoping to read that this year as well. For plays, I have this little tiny book, and in this book there are 4 Shakespeare plays. Actually, I have the full selection. I promise you that the plays this year will not just be Shakespeare, but I'm trying to read the books that I own, and I've had these for years, and so I need to read them. I have read a lot of Shakespeare plays. I used to be an English teacher, so I taught Shakespeare. The first one is the only one that I've read so far, and this is The Tempest. A lot of people really like The Tempest. It is not my favorite. When it comes to dramas, there's a lot of political intrigue and stuff with Shakespeare dramas. If you have not heard of The Tempest, it is a story about revenge and forgiveness. Prospero is probably the most famous character in this story. Him and his daughter are like sent away, exiled, kind of almost threatened, like they sent him out and he hopes that they die. The brother, it's always the brother. on a ship. They end up being on an island. Prospero captures the spirit and gets magic, and then ends up bringing his brother to the island where he wants to seek his revenge. His daughter's there, and she has kind of grown up on this island. And of course, she meets a boy, and they fall in love. And then that helps lead to forgiveness at the end of the story. So, not my favorite Shakespeare. It does talk a lot about kind of like the politics. I feel like it's the same with Henry V, Macbeth, all the stuff that's plotting about taking over and having power and ruling nations. That's not kind of something that I'm into. So out of Shakespeare, again, not my favorite. And I do promise I will read other plays besides Shakespeare this year. So if you have a play that you really like, drop it down below and I'll check it out. Cyrano de Bergerac is one of my favorite plays, and so I've already read that. I have like 3 copies of it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this category. For nonfiction, my interests are wide, and I have read a lot of different types of books for nonfiction. Some of them are books that lead to other books, and some of them are just things that I see online. I used to be an English teacher, but I also have a degree in psychology, so I do like quite a variety of things, and that brings me to like the first couple. Is the first book that I actually finished this year was The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson. For this book, a lot of people really, really like this book. I think if you are, if your parents are immature, this book was probably 70% identification and 30% helpful tips, but not as much as I was hoping would be in this book. And they go into different categories and like why some may be others, but again, 70% identification. It should have been 30-70, whereas 30% identification and 70% tips on how to engage with your family. So starting at the beginning, I was not super impressed with this book. It does give you some, but I hope that it would be more. There is a workbook that goes with this, and maybe that helps. But I would say it's probably a better book than an audiobook because it does reference going back to doing certain activities. Another book that I was not really impressed with was The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning by Marietta Magnusson. This book is sad because basically, I read it at the beginning of the year, and a lot of people were like, oh, read this book because of the organizational tips at the beginning of the year. But really, the book is, hey, you're going to die, and your kids are going to have to deal with your stuff. So maybe don't buy so much stuff. I'm like, you're going to die. Enjoy your life. Buy what you want. Yeah. As someone who's lost like all of their grandparents, I've seen my parents kind of deal with them like losing their things and going through their things, but live your life for your life and not because of what your kids have to deal with after you pass. Like that to me was weird, but I get not having a lot of stuff because if you have to move, that's troublesome, and it's a struggle as someone who has moved quite a bit in her life. But live your life. I know overconsumption is bad and bad for our environment and things like that, but have some joy in your life because this book was kind of sad. One of my, that was a 2-star. This other one is a 2-star. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He has a Nobel Prize in economics. And I wish I would have known that before I started reading this book, because this book is labeled as psychology, but this book is actually like his dissertation for economics. It is about decision making and how we kind of have 2 processes of making quick decisions and long decisions. And then it keeps going and going and going and going. It does very quickly go into economics from psychology, and I was not impressed. It felt like I was reading a dissertation. and I was not signing up for that. So again, I have a degree in psychology. I read a lot of psychology things. I was prepared for some of it, but not to be a full dissertation, especially since this is on a lot of best-selling books lists. So I don't know, not for me. Let's see, what should go to next? So many things. I have a lot more. I'll save the good ones for last. How about that? Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution. That book started out to be very interesting and then took a curveball. She does start talking about different hominoid species and kind of not just the body, but what we think the brain would be like. And she does make some interesting connections when it comes to evolution. But the majority of the book then goes into different female species. Like she talks about ducks, and if you know anything about ducks reproducing, that I was like, I don't know if the male and the female parts evolved because of their notorious actions. I'm being very vague because it's very... Ugh. But I did like the first part of the book. I did not like the second part of the book. I think she made too many assumptions, and I've seen some discourse online about the different evolutionary theories, but I did like the different hominid species, and I think that was an interesting take. But altogether, not a super fan. Praying Like Monks and Living Like Fools by Tyler Staton. He reads the audiobook. He is a minister. I don't know what I was expecting or why I actually chose this book to read. Religion also is something that I like to read about. He talks about Christian prayer. So I don't know if I was coming to it looking at kind of prayer and how prayer changes and different things, but it's all about Christian prayer. And he talks about his own experiences with prayer. He prayed for all of his classmates when he was in high school. And him and his congregation tried to do they prayed, they signed up for prayer spots, so they were continuously praying. He does also talk about the way that prayer is talked about in the Bible. And that to me was really interesting. Altogether, I was not really interested in this. I think if you are a devout Christian, I would check it out. But if you are looking for a book about like the background of prayer, he does a lot of personal stories, so that may not interest you in this. It's a pretty short book, and again, he does narrate it, so I'm going to leave that up to you and whether you choose to read it or not. A book that I think every woman from the age 30 to at least 45 should be required reading is The New Menopause, and this is by Mary Claire Havier. She is online. She has her own menopause products. She's an OBGYN. She goes into a lot of different aspects when it comes to menopause and perimenopause. There's a part in the book, and she narrates it as well, where she lists all the perimenopause symptoms, and it's a very hot topic for the last couple of years because, especially gentlemen, we did not learn about this about our own bodies growing up. And sometimes, especially as I'm hitting perimenopause, you feel crazy. All of these things are happening to you. Our bodies are breaking down. And it is a totally different part of life. And so she does talk about it. She does push a lot of hormone treatment, which for a long time was seen to be very harmful to women. And then they re-looked at that same study and they're like, oh, we read that wrong. And so hormones replacement therapy can be really, really helpful. And actually, come to find out, it can actually save us as we get older with osteoporosis and things like that. So talk to your doctors. Get the test done. She actually has a list of menopausal doctors. So if you're looking for someone that specializes in that, because not every OBGYN does. She then led me to The XX Brain by Lisa Mosconi. She talks about it in her book. I didn't like this one. And I kind of wish I didn't read it. This book is about the female brain, sort of, not really. She does spend some time talking about Alzheimer's. She spends the majority of the book talking about menopause. And in particular about the way that inflammation can affect our bodies, which is important and good to know. This lady really hates cheese. She talks about the Mediterranean diet. Both her and Haver talks about the Mediterranean diet, about that being the best diet for women and for most people because it does have anti-inflammatory foods. However, she really hates cheese and doesn't like alcohol and things like that, which is not surprising. She's a neuroscientist. I think that's what she does. And she makes a lot of health claims that I feel goes beyond her scope of medicine. I'll just leave it at that. I don't recommend it. I did like the new Menopause, but I was not a huge fan of the XX Brain. Books that I actually liked, like besides the Menopause book, which I thought was helpful. I read The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore. I read Kate Moore before. She wrote The Radium Girls. Fantastic book. This book, also great. Will piss you off. Guaranteed. Nonfiction, true story, Elizabeth Packard. Elizabeth Packard in 1860 was put in a mental institution by her husband for disagreeing with his religious beliefs. Because she started writing her own notes on the Bible and her own beliefs, and she wanted to switch churches, and she had a little bit extra time on her hand, he put her in a mental institution for years. There's a part in the book where Kate Moore talks about that the majority of men are put into mental institutions. Again, this is the 1860s. The men are put in the mental institution for masturbation. Women are put in the mental institutions for having an opinions. And that is not wrong. And that is infuriating. She gets out of the mental institution. She has to fight her way out. And then she spends the rest of her life basically reforming the laws that put her in there in the first place. And so she finagled her way out and then worked to get her friends out. And it was such a big thing in her life, was never the same after that. And so she really had to work for that. And the thing that is really sad after going through all that, they're like, divorce your husband. And she says, I can't because he'll take my kids away. And in fact, he did take her kids away. Even though she decided to stay married to him, he left with her kids and would not let her see them. As they got older, she was able to get custody because her husband sucked. Again, infuriating book. Very, very important to see how far we've come as a country. And then when I think about, oh yeah, it was a long time ago, we were still putting women, we still put women in mental institutions, but we were putting women in mental institutions for lots of things in the 1950s and 60s. And the fact that also the Supreme Court just came out and said that conversion therapy violates the law against conversion therapy that violates the First Amendment. Get mad again. Get mad. The last book I'm going to talk about was my favorite out of all of them, and that's a great question. I'd love to tell you, and this is Elise Myers. Elise Myers came to fame on, I don't know if it was TikTok or what. I think she started on Facebook and then definitely TikTok and Instagram. She had these little short vignette stories. She'd be like, let me tell you about the time. Oh, that's a great. Oh, you want to hear about this time? I'd love to tell you. And then she grew from there. She tells a lot of these little stories about her life. She's a fantastic storyteller. I really hope she continues to write books. I know that this was a struggle for her. She talks about it in the acknowledgments as well. She talks about her younger life in college, meeting her husband. Beautiful stories, some really weird stories. One of them I have heard before, so she does tell some of the same stories if you've followed her on social media. She does also talk about her struggle with OCD. She reads it. This is actually the first book that I had to slow down in speed because she does talk pretty quickly. So normally I'm reading at like 1.25, but I definitely had to slow this one down for her. But so far it was the highlight of my nonfiction. I did like the women, the woman they could not silence. It was a good book, but it was enraging. Speaking about enraging, let's get into fiction, because I have not been having the best year for reading this year. I'm going to start with some books that I really didn't like. I'm sorry if you like them. We're still friends. We're allowed to have different opinions, but I would not recommend these books. I got a couple 1 stars, and for me that's kind of rare. The first one is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. And he wrote The Silent Patient. And in the story, I guess he did a lot of research on psychology stuff. But again, psychology degree, this is the worst therapist I've ever seen. The story is about a woman. She's a group therapist. So she does her medium is like group therapy and groups and how group dynamics. Her niece is at college. One of her friends dies, so she goes to like support her niece, and she becomes part of the investigation. It never occurs to her to talk to them as a group, the secret society that these girls are dying in, until she goes sees her own therapist. I'm like, this is your thing, girl. This is what you do. I did not like this story at all. There's a secret society within it that are called the Maidens. It's loosely based on another like secret society, not so secret society that was there at the same college. I think it's Oxford. But yeah, it's a short book, but I wish I would have never picked it up. But it was one of the books that I own. You can see I don't have it anymore because I got rid of it. Didn't like it that much. Actually 2 other books that I really didn't like. I don't know who it was, and I hope I didn't say for video, but there was a woman online that was talking about, oh, if you like this movie, read this book. And one of them was, if you liked The Craft, read The Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. When I went on to Goodreads, this has a lot of 5 stars. I really hated this book. To me, was not like The Craft. The only thing that's crafty is that there are a bunch of young girls who discover witchcraft, and it doesn't quite go the way that they want it to. In fact, the witchcraft element of it felt secondary. It felt like the author wanted to write a book about unwed mothers going into homes in Florida in the 1970s, and then wrote that book, and then said, oh, I have to have another element in which to be a little bit more marketable. And so they stuck the witchcraft part in it. That's what it felt like to me. There are horrendous things that happen in this book. These girls, again, unwed mothers in the 1970s, are forced into these homes by their families. You do see or read, I should say, you read 2 very detailed descriptions of births. 2 different ladies. There's also a young girl who's there because she was molested by her priest, and the priest now wants the baby. So yeah, awful things. I hated the main character. She was awful the whole book. Yeah, not a fan. And this does not go well for me reading any other Grady Hendrix book. The same lady that said if you like The Craft or read this book said if you like The Mummy, read What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. I wished I would have DNF'd this book. I don't know why I made it all the way through. I was looking for a mummy. I love The Mummy. This book is not it. It's just set in Egypt. There is an element, there's a magic element that I thought was really interesting, and I hoped that they would have gotten more into it, where objects are kind of have a magical like hum to them, and they'll like let you know when other things, and she touches one and she gets visions. That was a really cool part of the story. It's very minor. They're looking for Cleopatra's tomb. They could have been looking for anyone's tomb, but it was not great. I didn't like Inez as the main character. Wit is her love interest. He is definitely not an O'Connell, and I will tell you, Inez is not an Evie. Inez is so dumb the whole book. Everything is her fault. and she struggles with that. And I will also say the book probably is a 2 for me. The audiobook is a 1. The audiobook narrator, she narrates a lot of books in Spanish. She has this very interesting way of reading. She did The Name Bearer, which I also disliked, and in particular, I disliked her reading of it. She does fantastic accents for other characters, but her intonation when she's reading Inez is, she goes into this because Inez is from Argentina. So anytime you get a Hispanic word, she goes into it like Argentina, and like, so it takes me a little out when you're saying those certain words, but then, I don't know, it just drove me crazy, and I really wish that I would have not read this book at all. And I hope I never see that book talk lady again, because I'm not taking any of her suggestions. The other books I actually really liked, so I do have some good reads on here. The Marvelers by Donnell Clayton. Read it. It's fantastic. It's young adults, middle grade, magic school. Loved it. Fantastic. I can't wait to read the next one. It's a book actually that I've owned from Owlcrate forever. And again, I'm trying to read some of my own books. I've already given it away. I liked it that much. I gave it to someone else to read. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. The Grace Year by Kim Leggett. I don't know who recommended that book. I've never seen that book before. It is so unhinged. Basically, The Grace Year is about a group of girls who live in this religious town. I don't quite know what time period and stuff is happening, but you get to a point of teenage life where they send you off to an island to experience your magic so that you can come back and get married, because Eve is the one that gives you the magic, and that disrupts everything. Then you find out that it's all kind of a shim-sham, but they do also hunt these girls. If you leave the island or leave the little camp, they'll hunt you for your body parts because they think they have magic in them. It's basically Handmaid's Tale meets The Lord of the Flies. It's very unhinged. It's very violent. I loved it. It was so good. I like the main character. She's very smart, and I think that's why I didn't like the River, what the River knows, because Inez was she was messing up every chance she could get. But The Grace Year, fantastic. Another book that I have owned for a while, actually, if you've watched my videos, it was a book that I got that was a blind date book. I don't know, it was wrapped and I didn't know what it was, and it was Wilderlore, The Accidental Apprentice. This is middle grade. This is not quite my age range. It is, again, magic. So we have our Barclay as our main character. He lives in a town that is like no magic, no running, no fun, no nothing. And then he accidentally kind of stumbles through and then gets bonded with a beast. His parents were killed by a big beast, and so he is not about magic, and so he accidentally gets bonded, and he's trying to get rid of it, but he got kicked out of his town, and so he ends up wandering around. He meets a friend that's her dragon, is her beast, and then he has to go through these trials in order to get to be an apprentice. So the apprentice will take the beast away so he can go back to his town. But he meets a lot of people. He's the whole time he's like, I don't want anything to do with this world. I just want to get out of here. Just make me normal again. And then, of course, you know, the more he grows and the more he learns, the more he likes this world. So it's a full series. I probably won't read the rest of them. It's not quite for me. It's not quite my age range, but I think if you're like pre-Harry Potter age, this would be a good series to get into. And this is by Amanda Foote. Last book. My goodness, last book. I love Angeline Boulley and her series because they all intertwine. And so The Firekeeper's Daughter is the first of the 3 so far that's out. I hope she continues writing them. But The Sisters in the Wind is her latest book, and it fits in between the two. So it takes place, I think, 5 years after The Firekeeper's Daughter. This story has Donis and Jamie in it, which is fun, but also really sad. And this book focuses on ICWA, which is the Indigenous Child Welfare Act, because each book kind of focuses on a very specific Native American issue, whether it's drug use or the Repatriation Act, or this one is ICWA. So for those of you who don't know, ICWA, it used to be, and I talked about this a little bit with some of the other Native American stories, but there were boarding schools, right? Native kids were taken from Native families. And ICWA says, like, you have to reunite them with their tribe. Like, you have to allow them to experience the indigenous life that they would have lived outside of the home that they were in. And so our main character, she is half, her father is white. He tells her mother, like, gave up her parental rights. You find out that's not fully true. The whole time I had the feeling, I thought her father, like, was not her father, that he just, like, kidnapped her, but he is her father. The issue that I have and why it's not a 5-star read for me is a 4-star read. I love Angeline Boulley. I will read anything she writes. Is the main character, she has issues with her mother giving up her rights for her. That character then becomes pregnant as a teenager because she goes into foster care. Her father dies. And she becomes pregnant, and then she's willing to give her child up for adoption. Like, that's not a struggle for her at all to be like, oh, this baby needs a better home, and I'm okay to give this baby up for adoption. When she was like, I'm hating on my mom for giving me up. Why would she do that? She doesn't care about me. And so that disconnect was never full circle for me. And that I struggled with that a little bit for that character. But the rest of the story, their lives are in danger. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens, just like in every one of these series books. Man, these people go through a lot. But I loved it. I can't wait to read the next one. And that's it. That's all 25 books that I've read so far this year. Again, please help me out. I need a good book to read. I am in the middle of one right now, which is a banned book. So far I'm loving it. And that's the Last Night at the Telegraph Club. So I'm going to finish that here very soon. Yeah, any suggestions down below, and I will see you next time.